Good morning, everyone. My name is Beatriz Derringer. I am the mayor of Rolling Hills in Southern California. I've been actively participating on several legislative committees shortly after becoming a council member in 2013. I want to thank each of you for joining our statewide town hall regarding SB9 and 10. These are two bills that would make drastic and irreversible changes to single-family neighborhoods throughout California. Before we start, however, I just want to share some brief background and why I wanted to organize this town hall meeting. As you know, each local community has its own zoning laws that are designed to best meet the unique needs of that community. As local elected officials, we consider the input from our residents before we make any changes or exceptions to our zoning laws. We want to hear from them. These are our neighbors. We live in that city too. But each year, local electeds have had to oppose bills that are proposed in the California state legislature that impose a one-size-fits-all approach for every community and restrict our ability as your representatives to make decisions based on the needs of our residents. Despite our previous objections, this year, the legislature proposed SB9 and SB10. These bills completely override our local single-family zoning laws. They eliminate single-family neighborhoods all over our state without creating any affordable housing, which cities are required to provide for in their zoning. They also create huge infrastructure, public safety, and other problems without providing any money or resources to solve these problems. These bills have been continuously and strongly opposed by numerous elected officials across the state, pleading with the legislature on behalf of their residents. When SB 1120, a prior version of SB9, came up last year, I had the opportunity to speak on a Zoom call to one of the major sponsors of this bill who came to our legislative committee to ask us to support his bill. I explained to the senator that my city was like the city of paradise in the very high fire zone with narrow dead-end streets and only 3 streets leading out of the city, and that we also had designated landslide areas. We have had already 2 fires and 1 landslide. I told him it would be difficult enough for us to evacuate all of our current residents safely based on our current population. But if this bill was enacted, people in my city would definitely die trying to get out of the city. He looked concerned and said he would look into it, but no changes were made to address that issue last year or this year. So the bottom line is, if legislators do not care when we, as your representatives, tell them truthfully that people will die as a result of their bills, then something more needs to be done. Despite all this concerted opposition, the legislature has not been deterred. Their intent is to pass these bills, and it appears that the governor is prepared to sign them unless they hear from you. There needs to be an avalanche of opposition by you, their constituents. So our job here at this town hall meeting is to provide you with accurate information about what these bills do so that you can take action if you're concerned. So with that, we're going to have a very short video. This video is only 2 minutes. It's going to provide you an overview, a pictorial overview of SB9 and 10 and how it will impact single-family neighborhoods. So thank you.
California faces a housing showdown. 2 bills working through the legislature in Sacramento threaten every single-family home in the state. They eliminate local zoning and permit unchecked development anywhere and everywhere. We all know California needs more affordable housing. In the guise of solving that problem, Bills SB9 and SB10 tear down existing homes and apartments for market rate replacements that cost even more. Under SB9, developers can buy a lot, split it in 2, and build 2 houses on each half. 1 house becomes 4. the same developer can do it again, and other developers can too. No limit, no control. Under SB 10, developers can demolish a house and put up a 10-unit apartment in its place. With no obligation to upgrade gas, water, sewers, and power, what's in the ground right now will have to support 4 to 10 times as many people. With setbacks reduced to 4 feet, we lose shade trees and yards to absorb precious rainfall. Who benefits from this devastating change? Developers, sure, but behind them are Wall Street banks and hedge funds, buying houses, warehousing property, pressing the legislature for unchecked development. Lawmakers hear their voices. Now they need to hear ours. California needs more affordable housing, but there's a way to do it right. There are hundreds of miles of commercial corridors with existing infrastructure, near transportation, ripe for housing development with economies of scale. With imagination, California can build the future it needs without destroying the communities we have. United Neighbors speaks for what's distinctive in every community. Join us to tell Sacramento no on SB9 and SB10.
Okay, so right now we're going to go right into a pre-recorded video of Dan Carrig. Dan is a longtime legislative analyst who is highly respected both by local officials and by the state legislature. He has served for many years as the legislative director of the League of California Cities, and that's how I got to know him. So I think personally that in the housing area, he's one of the best. So I wanted to bring him to you to explain exactly what these bills do based on the language of the bills, which is how they're going to be judged in the courts. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dan Carrig. I'm a consultant, and I've previously worked for about 30 years around the state capitol. I've been a consultant to the Assembly Housing Committee. I've also been a lobbyist for the League of California Cities on housing and land use, as well as the League of California Cities legislative director. I'm currently a consultant that works for several other groups currently. Next slide, please. So we're here to talk about SB9 and SB10, and you know, in my view, those two bills are going to make a significant change to single-family neighborhoods and single-family lifestyle in California. A really major change. But let's talk about some basics here on zoning. Now, today, you know, if you talk about zoning, those decisions are made by your city. And I'll say city or county if you happen to live in a county area, but I'll just say city for the rest of this presentation. So your local city government controls your zoning. And if the city wanted to change your zoning, there's a lot of transparency and due process requirements that would have to be complied with. You would get public notices about this proposed change. You would be able to go down to a public meeting or multiple public meetings. There would be an extensive environmental analysis that would have to be prepared about this change, looking at all the impacts. And if somebody didn't really like the analysis, didn't think it was done well enough, they always can sue to make sure it's done right. And then the ultimate decision would be made by your local city council, and that they're accountable to you. And if you didn't like their decision or the way they were headed, you can vote them out of office. Next slide, please. So California legislators, there's a lot of focus on changing single-family zoning and putting more density into those areas. The legislature has been passing a lot of laws aimed at removing local authority or eroding local control over land use. These new laws are either shifting power to state agencies or making it easier for developers to build projects with shortcuts that bypass due process as public hearings as well as environmental analysis. When someone comes up to you and uses the word ministerial in this area, you better watch it. Because really what ministerial means, that's the word they're putting into these laws, it means that you as a resident, you have no say, nor does your city council in terms of what the project can be. The decision isn't subject to any public review or discussion. There's no environmental analysis under CEQA. So a developer can walk right in the door, and if their project matches whatever the bill says, the law says, that's it. Next slide. So again, there's a lot of focus on adding more density in these single family neighborhoods. Now, recently, there were some changes to what they call ADU law, accessory dwelling unit law, that have already kind of started this process of adding more units into city single family zones. Now, they allow a property owner or a developer to add ministerially, remember that word, two or more units onto the property. And there are the two types of units. One is called sort of a regular ADU or detached ADU. This is something that can be built separately, like say in the backyard, maybe between 800 to 1,200 square feet, separate living unit. And then the other type of ADU is called a JADU, a junior ADU. These are up to about 500 square feet, square feet, and are made by basically carving off a piece of your existing single family home and having a separate rental unit there. Now, these ADUs, they can be rented, but they can't be sold separately. Next slide. Now, SB9 comes along and it is much more aggressive than even the ADU issues that I've just explained. In my opinion, would rezone most single family homes in neighborhoods in the state and allow between 4 to 6 units per parcel. Now, there's two main provisions in these laws. One is a duplex provision and the other is a lot split provision. Now, in the duplex, a developer could tear down a single family home and replace it with 2 homes. They can chop up and make 2 separate units of at least 800 square feet that can be sold separately. They also can put at least 2 of these ADUs on the property. That gets you to 4. Now, parking is limited. The bill says that you only have to have 1 parking space per unit, which means obviously there's going to be more cars than that because you've got 4 units already, and there's going to be some impacts to the local streets. But if you're within a half a mile of transit, you don't have to have any parking. So cities often have different ordinances that address issues important to the community. In one city, it might be preserving a view. Another place, it's preserving oak trees, all sorts of things that are important to the community. This bill says that in order to build those units, the city can't enforce any ordinance that would, quote unquote, physically preclude those units from being built. So there are a lot of things that are important to your community that you may not be able to enforce. Then comes the lot split. This SB9 also allows a developer to split a single family lot and build 2 more units. Basically, take the backyard and then build 2 more separate units there that can be conveyed. Next slide. Now, there's always this question: how many units can you build? Well, the author and the sponsors of the bill keep saying, oh no, it's only 4 units. It's only 4 units. But when you really dig into the language, it's not. You cannot rely on that because it's not quite in the language. We think there's a way you can get to 5 units. In other words, developer buys a single family home, adds these 2 ADUs like they can under existing law, that gets you to 3. And then they ask for, they come in and use SB9 and ask for a lot split and then get 2 more units there. The language doesn't clearly prohibit that in the bill. There's a way to get to 6 units. In other words, you kind of do what I've just said. You build the ADUs, then you go in and use SB9 and not only split the house to make a duplex, but then you also try to get a lot split. And then there's some other scenarios that potentially more units can be built. Now, all these things can be fixed with language that would really ensure a 4-unit cap. It's been asked for, it hasn't been added to the bill. So you have to deal with the bill as it is. And we think there's some room for more than 4 units, despite what is being represented as the limit. Next slide. Okay, so other things with SB9s. One thing that's a little interesting given these times is it allows units to be added into high fire zones as long as they comply with building standards. all units have to comply with building standards. It doesn't, that exception doesn't do anything. And we think this is really going to create a significant public safety problem, given that this sort of an unregulated type of development in these areas. Also, there's no affordable housing required in the bill. It's pretty much a market rate bill that be driven by the market as to where these units are built. And then also, if you live in a homeowners association, the bill's silent on whether or not it applies and whether it preempts CC&Rs. I'd expect this issue to be litigated. And that's another issue that has been, that the author's office has been asked to address in terms of amendments, and it hasn't been addressed. So that's it out there too. Next slide. Okay, here's another bill, SB10 Wiener, which is kind of a companion bill in some ways to SB9. Now, this bill would allow the rezoning of an urban parcel, and that includes a single family parcel, for up to 10 units, plus some of these ADUs that we keep talking about. So I view this bill as really a precursor to another move in the future by the state to really try to leverage local communities to rezoning areas, which could include single family areas, to allow these 10 plus unit projects. Now, the way the bill's drafted, it says it authorizes a city or county to think about this. 1, overrule its own zoning, right? 2, overrule a local voter initiative that applies to the city. And then skip the environmental analysis, all to rezone this 10 units in these areas. You also could do this again in these fire hazard areas if you just comply with the building standards. So anyway, I would expect that if this bill passes, that you're going to see efforts by the state to leverage communities to try to use this law, whether it's pressure from state agencies or it's threats of fines or penalties or other things. And there's a bill out there, AB 215 by Assemblymember Chu, that would try to make cities responsible for actual housing production when cities don't build houses. So obviously the legislature is headed this way, and they'll try to use SB10 as a leverage point. So if anything I've said for you as a resident catches your attention, you should be talking to your legislators as well as the governor's office. The legislature is going to be back in session on August 16th, and the governor is going to get any bills sent to him by September 10th and has to make a decision by October 10th. So thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, Dan, I want to ask a question. You made it clear that both these bills do not provide for affordable housing for the very low income bracket. But what I want to ask is, for your average family that wants to buy a single family home for their growing family, does this, what does this do to their prospects?
Well, I think, well, two things. One, if you think about, this proposal of being able to build between 4 and 6 units on a single family parcel, there's going to be a lot of developers who are going to be very interested of coming in and making an investment and building a lot of units. Now, what that's going to do to that parcel, they're going to be able to pay a lot more for that piece of land than your average family would be just sort of looking for an average single family home. And I also question what it really does to the single family lifestyle. If you're trying to move into a single family neighborhood because you've got young kids and you're concerned about they want to ride bikes on the sidewalk and you're concerned about low traffic and this and that, this is a very disruptive proposal because it creates a lot of uncertainty. You buy a home and these things could be popping up and down the street. And as we've talked before, you as a resident or your city council isn't really going to have any say because it's just going to pop up whenever they pop up. So I think it destabilizes the whole purchase decision for young families as well.
All right. And then some people think these laws will not apply to their city because their cities are charter cities. Is that true or not?
No, these bills and bills like them routinely have provisions that say that because of the statewide concern that the intent is to preempt charter cities as well as general law cities. And for the most part, I don't think there's any safe harbor with a charter city.
Okay, and then with regard to SB9, let's say a homeowner doesn't learn about SB9 and it gets passed and it becomes law, and then first time they're aware of it is that there's a developer building these multi-units required by SB9 right next door to them. Do they have any options to object to this development or try to mitigate it at all?
Well, I think once some resident finds out when someone bulldozers across the street and putting one of these projects in, I think they're going to be shocked, and then I think they're going to be outraged because there is no due process associated with this. Back to what I said before, if the city council was doing something like this, there'd be public notice, there'd be a chance to have public hearings. There's a lot of process and due process that goes into it. The legislature is skipping over all that and basically rezoning your neighborhoods in this way. And so I think there'll be some very frustrated residents across the state once they start figuring out what the legislature did.
And then with SB10, you mentioned that's not mandatory, but given what you said about the legislature's incentives to make cities responsible, like in this AB 215 for housing production when cities don't build houses, and their ability to fine cities up to $10,000 a day for failure to comply with the housing requirements, how effective could a homeowner be in trying to object to SB10 if a city feels that they have to impose this in order to avoid these fines and being taken to court by the Attorney General?
Yes, I really think that if a city or county was ever at the point where they would even consider doing remember, let's talk about it, overturning your own ordinances, overturning a voter approved ordinance, and avoiding environmental analysis. I mean, no city or county in my mind would even think about doing something like that. They would have to they'd be under some extreme pressure, either a litigation, fines, penalties, some kind of state pressure to do that. And I think, again, I think it would spark a lot of controversy locally and a lot of frustration about the legislators that actually approved it.
And then lastly, in terms of infrastructure, cities provide for schools, parks, water, sewers, power grid, public safety. Given that none of these bills have any additional monies for that, does that mean that cities may be required to either tax their residents or reduce services in order to provide for these items for a increased population?
Yeah, the bill's is very disruptive because it's completely disconnected from the local planning process. Today, your city has a general plan, and everything that is in the general plan, whether you're thinking about the existing services to the residents of the city, the growth of the city, that all has to be coordinated, and that's what the city council does. It has an organized plan. This is completely off to the side and says, anybody, a developer can show up and where the city plan is allowed, one unit, build 4 or 6. That's going to have a lot of impacts on the water, on the sewer, on infrastructure, on all sorts of things. And because this can kind of pop up sort of like popcorn, you don't know exactly where it's going to happen. I think it's going to be very disruptive. And to the extent there are strains on infrastructure, either the local residents are going to have to pick it up, or service quality is going to decline. One of the two.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, so now you've heard from Dan Carrick, who, as I mentioned, is very well respected both by the legislature and by local officials. Before we go into the next presentation, I just wanted to let you all know that we have 1,660 people that have registered for this seminar. So this is actually unprecedented. I don't know of any statewide Zoom seminar that's had this many. And we only started maybe about putting out the word about a week and a half ago. So this is an indication of how concerned people are. We will have a Q&A, which we'll be able to address on the Zoom call regarding some questions that you're posing in the question and answer section. And the video of this presentation will be made available, and that short 2-minute video is also available as well. So we'll give you all the information about that. But right now I want to go next to a presentation from Maria and Jeff Calban of United Neighbors. And Jeff Calban is an actual licensed architect, and his wife Maria is on the legislative committee for her homeowners association. They're going to provide a graphic illustration of what Dan Carrick described of the effects of SB9 and SB10 in a single family neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you ready?
No, I have to figure out how to share the screen.
You're sharing. I'm sorry, can you?
I guess we have a little technical difficulties. Please bear with us.
Then you're right.
We can see your screen.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. Okay, sorry. Oh,
Here we go.
here we go. We started United Neighbors because we realized that homeowners or renters were generally not informed or organized enough to be heard over the strong special interest groups that have held major sway over our legislators when they go to Sacramento. Special interest groups have lots of money and therefore clout, but all of us together form a huge voting bloc. If we are united and informed, we can make a difference and make our representatives accountable to us again. The bills coming out of Sacramento for the last 3 years aim squarely at ending single-family neighborhoods and local control, and do nothing to solve our affordable housing problem. We can all agree on one thing. There is an affordable housing problem in California and frankly, all over the world. How we solve this issue is where we differ. We feel single-family neighborhoods do not need to be dismantled in order to have equitable, affordable communities. Sacramento stopped giving cities community redevelopment funds to the tune of $1.5 billion annually in 2011, ending an important source of money for cities to finance affordable housing. Some estimate that 1 million units of affordable housing were not built because of this funding loss. With the surplus budget the state currently has, it still has not reinstated community redevelopment funding. California has a very diverse single-family neighborhoods. Lot sizes vary greatly, but SB9 and 10 apply their conditions on each and every lot in the same manner. We would like to now illustrate graphically what Dan explained about these bills. This is going to be our typical lot. Currently, the law allows 2 accessory dwelling units on every lot in California. This is a fairly practical option that allows families to augment their income and provide housing for a friend or family member. As you can see, the ADU can be as big as 1,200 square feet, and the junior ADU is generally around 500 feet and has to be attached to the house. But no matter what size lot you have, a 4-foot side and rear setback is all your community can enforce. Now SB9 kicks in, and the first provision of SB9 allows you to add a second home to your lot. That home can be attached or separate unit depending on the lot size and your personal preference. Accessory dwelling units can also be added by state law, making it possible to have 4 units where 1 house used to be, with no limit really on the size of these units. As you can see, this can add a lot of density, and how many lots around you become this dense is out of your control.
Provision 2 of SB9 allows for a lot split. Lot split is 40, 60, 50, 50. And this diagram shows you one way to do it is a horizontal split, it could be a vertical split, it could be a diagonal split, it could be a curved split, as long as you're no greater than 60%, 40% in how you split the lot. Okay? It also allows 2 units to be built on each lot. But let's talk about the process. As an architect, we talk to our clients about the process and full project costs. Part of the process is that you cannot split a lot if you have mortgage on the property, because a mortgage is tied to the parcel, not to the building. So you have to pay off your mortgage. 2, then you have to demolish the house so you can split the lot. And then the homeowners need to move someplace else for the next 12 to 18 months, which is again part of their overall project budget. The SB9 provision 2 says that you cannot preclude a minimum of 2 800 square foot units per property, and the state ADU laws may still apply. Construction costs today are $300 per square foot. That means for the 4 units we show here, which is 3,200 square feet, that's approximately $1 million construction loan above all the other expenses that our homeowner needs to take into consideration.
Senator Atkins, who is the author of this bill, states that lot splitting gives homeowners the opportunity to create additional income or provide an aging parent a safe place to live in your family. We beg to differ. This is not affordable nor practical option for the average homeowner, but it's a perfect tool for a developer who is already set up with his financing.
Now, provision 2 allows for many variations, as Dan was saying in his video. So here's your lot, and here's an example of how to do 6 units. On 60% of your lot, you build 2 houses, an ADU and a junior ADU. You can then split your lot and build 2 more units.
Here again, this density is by right. There's no input from the community.
SB10 allows a 10-unit apartment building on a single-family lot, plus 2 ADUs and 2 junior ADUs. That's a 10 to 14-unit apartment house on a single-family lot. Could be next to you, across the street, down your block, and there are no affordable units, and there is no public process. This is by right. This is a typical community, and existing neighborhoods were designed to handle a certain amount of density.
Again, the danger of these bills is there's no limit to how many lots in your neighborhood can be redeveloped with this much density. There's no mechanism to stop our single-family neighborhoods from eventually becoming multifamily market rate neighborhoods. This can happen everywhere. There's also the claim that the same developer cannot build right next door to a lot he has already split, but it's a deceptive claim because another developer can. And we just want to go over quickly the environmental and infrastructure concerns we should all have about these bills. On the left is our existing neighborhoods. The water and sewer and gas lines were planned for this size community. Now these bills allow 6 to 10 times more density than anticipated, and by developers, but developers, are not asked to upgrade our infrastructure. We will be responsible for the broken water lines, and worse, for broken sewer lines. And back to the environmental concern, as you can see on our left, we have yards and trees. This is what we will lose with our adding more density. As you can see, the more density we have, we begin to lose those backyards. This is a 4-foot setback. This is how we lose our trees and permeable surfaces that allow water to replenish our aquifers. In LA, 80% of our tree canopy is in private backyards. A UCLA study cited construction as the #1 reason for loss of tree canopy. Once we lose trees to more development, we lose them forever. The heat island effect, where concrete and asphalt absorb heat and make cities hotter, is real, but we continue to ignore the warnings of climate scientists.
This is one small community that decided to go from single family zoning from multifamily zoning. You can see the impact here, exactly as Maria said, with our 4-foot setbacks. You have only one house left with yard with trees and permeable surfaces. Everything else is hardscape. When you go and think about rezoning the entire state of California, we're facing an environmental disaster with absolutely no environmental review.
As our cities become hotter and drier, more cities face fire risks. We are in a drought. Businesses and communities are being impacted, but our legislators continue to ignore these realities and add uncontrolled density in our communities. Two of the worst outcomes of these bills is displacement and gentrification. Developers will find less expensive land in working class neighborhoods that are often adjacent to expensive, fast-growing communities. What gets built here is not affordable to the people who live here. And the example above are 3 little bungalows that were built in this little working class neighborhood, and they have been demolished. And what replaced them are the condos below that start at $1.2 million in this working class neighborhood. In quick review, SB9 and 10 offers no affordable housing. It reduces setbacks to 4 feet, minimal parking, 1 car per unit, none if you're within a half mile of transit. There's no infrastructure improvement required and no environmental review. So we will upzone the entire state of California with no review. And there is no public comment or notification.
But there are good solutions. One obvious place to start are our underbuilt commercial corridors. The image above shows you a typical corridor. These are throughout California, and right up against them are our overly dense single-family neighborhoods. So whether it's El Cajon Boulevard in San Diego, or it's Freeport Boulevard in Sacramento, why would we upset our single-family neighborhoods when there is so much low-density commercial right adjacent to them? So here, you're seeing El Camino Real in Silicon Valley. This is how it exists today. If you built it out by current zoning, on El Camino Real alone, you could get 250,000 dwelling units. Here is another commercial site. This is a 9.5 acre site that is basically empty. And if we were to look at how you can repurpose this site, look at this concept. At the edge of a single family zone, we can put in starter homes. Then you can develop the rest of the site as retail with mixed income housing above it, and you have sufficient land for landscaping, courtyards, maybe even a small public park. Here you have the economy of scale and infrastructure to develop meaningful, affordable, and mixed income housing.
Building density in these corridors with the support of redevelopment funds from the state can add hundreds of thousands of housing units. As these centers thrive, they start to generate tax revenue that can improve transit networks, fund more affordable housing, and help support schools. These are only a few solutions. Our Vision Committee has sent an 80-page study to the governor detailing more solutions for creating more equitable communities that allow local control and don't harm our neighborhoods. If we don't stand up and oppose these bills now, we will lose all our rights. Our representatives and our governor must be contacted now. We cannot let them ignore us any longer. Sacramento is relentless in wanting to end single-family neighborhoods for no reason at all. We must stop these bills again and force our legislators to sit down and solve this problem correctly. Why destroy established single-family neighborhoods when we have solutions that can solve the affordable housing crisis?
Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you so very much. I appreciate that. And next, we're going to have some speakers that will address some arguments that have been raised in favor of SB9 and 10. Proponents of these bills have argued that single-family zoning is racist and discriminates against minorities. One of the many who have risen up to address that argument and fight for her neighborhood is Lynetta McElroy. She's a community activist in her predominantly African-American community known as Leimert Park in South Los Angeles. So I want to invite her to speak right now. And we actually, before we do that, we have a brief video featuring Lynetta because we want you to share that, and then she'll speak after the video. Thank you.
My husband and I have lived here for more than 30 years. Leimert Park is one of the oldest, stable, middle-class Black communities in the country. Ray Charles lived here. Ella Fitzgerald lived here. Charles White lived here. In the California legislature right now, SB9 and SB10 will eliminate single-family zones. That threatens my community, and that threatens yours too. With SB9, developers can tear down one house and put up 4 in its place. With SB10, they can put up a 10-unit apartment house, and they can do it as often as they like. The threat is everywhere. Oakland, Sacramento, San Jose, upstate, downstate, no place is safe. Politicians promise affordable housing, more diversity, minimal displacement. Don't believe it. Where laws eliminate single-family zoning, neighborhoods get richer, whiter, younger. Families build wealth when they own their own homes. As neighborhoods upzone, existing home prices go down. One family sells, density increases. More families sell, and existing prices drop more. Wealth evaporates. Where do people go when their neighborhood gets torn out from under them? Disruptive development turns current homeowners into permanent renters. It's a massive transfer of wealth to corporate landlords and major developers. SB9 and SB10 rob homeowners of an essential way to build generational wealth in communities of color. Leimert Park is the seat of Black culture. We've got history that's alive today. If that dies, it's gone forever. I am tired of politicians trying to sell us a lie. Developers always sending me flyers, people calling saying they want to buy my home. I'm not selling. I'm staying right here. I want to thank you very much for playing that. And that is exactly how I feel. Here in South Los Angeles, we are ground zero for developers coming in and destroying our beautiful homes and doing away with the culture that we have here. As was mentioned in the video, Los Angeles, especially South Los Angeles, and also Oakland, really are the seats of Black culture. And when those homes are gone, when we are gone, and that is it, that cannot be replaced. And so that is why it is so important for us to let our legislators know that it is important to retain single-family zones. Not only that, for our culture, but do you know how much that enhances the lives of families who have purchased a home so that they can pass down the generational wealth that is important so that we can send our children to school and we can give our children a good start in life. So I want you to think very carefully. What can you do? Well, later on in this video, or later on, I would say, in this presentation, we're going to show you what to do. And we ask you to please not only look carefully and listen carefully, but please continue on this fight, because this has to do with not only my community, we're at ground zero. The developers will come right to us because we don't have CC&Rs. Most of us don't even have HBOZs. And understand, HBOZ areas will not be saved because of SB5 or SB10. So my point is this: please help yourselves and us to retain the character of the communities that we've worked so hard for. And I want to thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lynetta. And I would point out, we're going to be addressing this later, but Homeowner association groups do not feel that they are in a safe zone, as Dan Carrick said. There's going to have to be litigation. These bills do not exempt homeowner associations, and even though lobbyists have asked for them to be exempted. So this is a concern for communities all across the state. But next, we want to hear from San Fernando Council member Cindy Montañez. Cindy's community is predominantly Latino, and Cindy has also had the service that she spent in the California State Assembly, so she can provide that perspective as well. In addition, she is an environmental advocate, so she's going to address the impact of SB9 and 10 from all three of these perspectives. Cindy?
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. It's amazing, truly, and energizing to see over 1,000 of us from across the state united to protect our dreams and our right to live in neighborhoods that are not overcrowded, simply because the state sold us out and took away decision-making from our local city councils, which are elected by communities to make these exact decisions on local land use. So again, I'm Cindy Montañez. I'm a council member in the city of San Fernando. It's a city that's been around 110 years out the northern part of LA County. I'm also CEO of Tree People, which is an environmental nonprofit here in Los Angeles. We have organized more than 3 million people all over to plant and care for trees in our mountains, in our forests, in our schools, and in our neighborhoods. And so a lot of the trees that literally have been planted by millions of people are now at risk of being destroyed with bills like SB9 and SB10 that are going to affect the environments that we live in. The only way we are going to defeat these fierce attacks against the quality of life we all have worked hard to obtain is to grow our movement of Californians, of Americans who will fight for our right to have affordable rents or own a home, have a yard where we can have trees and gardens, have our kids, our grandkids play outside, sit underneath a tree. We don't want to be forced to live in overcrowded neighborhoods. Big money interests are determined to destroy single-family neighborhoods across the state, and they're not even addressing the lack of affordability. If the legislature approves SB9 and SB10 and the governor signs them, residents are going to lose all say over the zoning of what happens in our streets. Many of us, our families, ourselves, our kids, our grandkids have put our entire savings into buying these homes. Our communities will never be the same. And some communities like San Fernando have been the only places where sometimes communities of color and Latinos have been able to afford a single family home. So as a city council member in this beautiful city of San Fernando, which has 93% Latino population, I have literally met hundreds of individuals and families who have worked so hard to put their entire life savings into getting out of overcrowded apartments in other parts of the region to move into a neighborhood with single family homes. Our grandparents, our parents, many of them have come to this country so they could do something so basic, have a decent job, own a home, and send their kids to college. My parents sent 6 of us to college and now have 10 nieces or 10 grandchildren on their way to college or already graduating from college. And they were able to do all that because we were able to pull out equity from the home that they had purchased. So those dreams are on the verge of being destroyed by a group of disconnected legislators who have lost touch with the realities of millions of hardworking individuals and families. It bothers me, as I think it bothers all of us that are on this call, that they spew this rhetoric of the need for more affordable housing, yet their policies have made it nearly impossible for people to afford the homes in their neighborhood. Most of us can't even afford the home that we live in anymore or buy into the neighborhood of our dreams. So these bills in particular transfer the future of our neighborhoods into the hands of speculative real estate interest away from hardworking people We will not be kicked out. Yet we are on the verge of being kicked out because, as we just heard from Jeff, it costs $300 per square foot to develop working class neighborhoods where people are not making $50,000 a year, cannot afford to spend $300 per acre foot to develop. Gentrification will happen. There will be more people who are underhoused. There will be more people that will be on the verge of being homeless. All of that is going to increase because these bills do nothing to protect our current single family neighborhoods, homeownership, or even allow for affordable housing. So these bills remind me of redlining days when poor people of color were legally forced away from certain neighborhoods into overcrowded neighborhoods, or the days when homes were taken away through illegal force or eminent domain to run highly polluting freeways through those same neighborhoods. These bills have the potential to hurt all of us, but especially communities like San Fernando or Leimert Park, where land is cheaper and where people don't have high-powered lobbyists contributing millions of dollars to fund initiatives trying to take away our community's right to quality of life. State-ordered upzoning will drive land costs very high, and in turn, housing costs will spiral upward. Individuals and families would be competing and bidding against investors, rental giants. All of this is going to happen by right with no public hearings. No affordable units are required in these bills. No garages are required. Just one parking space per unit. No yard is required. These setbacks, as we've heard, are just 4 feet. They don't even care if this happens in fire hazard severity zones. And we've seen the fires happening throughout the state of California. Developers are going to be free to destroy all trees on lots, even as the state is talking about climate change and heat island impacts. 80 to 90% of all trees in most cities are located on private property. This is going to have devastating impacts on our urban forest, on wildlife, on air quality, on urban heat, our quality of life. We've already seen it with mansionization in Los Angeles and overdevelopment happening all over. We don't have the millions of dollars to funnel into campaigns, we know that, but we do have millions of people like all of you who have a voice and can write, call, and vote out legislators who vote to destroy our residential neighborhoods. There is nothing more powerful, I can tell you as a former legislator, than a group of caring, involved voters asking for a meeting with us. Know the power of your voice. Today we can have Zoom meetings. We could get 1,000 people together the way we did this morning. We could send letters, write emails, tag your elected officials on social media, and use all these methods to continue to grow our movement. We are not asking for tax breaks or billions of dollars in new expenses. All of us are simply asking for the state to not impose, once again, policies that will hurt Californians. So let's continue our movement. Let's keep doing what we're doing. We have, a few days, a few weeks to make this happen. I know we can make it happen. We could put the pressure on the legislature. We could put the pressure on the governor, and we have a choice because we will be voting. And we're going to vote for those that defended our ability to live in single family residential neighborhoods, a dream that Americans have wanted since the day this country was founded.
Thank you, Cindy. Very well put, and that hits us right where we are with why we're doing this. So now that we've heard this information about the impacts of SB9 and 10 in your neighborhood, I want to, if you're at all concerned about what you've heard, I want you to stay tuned for Sharon Byrne, who's going to give you some very helpful tips regarding what you can do to contact your representatives and do it in an effective manner so that your voice can be heard, because we can do it. Collectively, we're going to do it. Sharon.
Thank you very much. And I hate to have to follow Cindy. Wow, that was a really good high bar. And we're going to be singing a lot of the same tune here shortly. I'm a community organizer and an activist. I live in the Santa Barbara area. I'm part of the United Nations Association, and I was a delegate to the United Nations 65th Annual Conference on the Status of Women and the Generation Equality Forums in Paris and Mexico City. If you are familiar with the Montecito area, you know we have been through a massive disaster. First, the Thomas Fire, the first of the California gigafires in 2017, and then a debris flow that killed 23 people in 2018. So the United Nations does take a very strong interest in housing. Obviously, they included it in the Declaration of Human Rights passed in 1948. That is Eleanor Roosevelt holding that Declaration of Human Rights. And as you can see here in the highlight of Article 25, housing is one of the human rights. The way that the UN looks at housing is that it's stability, security, and dignity, but should not be a commodity. They appointed a special rapporteur to the right on adequate housing, and they discovered in 2019 that many tenants worldwide now, this is Barcelona, London, Berlin, all around the world, are being forced out by global investment firms. And they specifically identified Blackstone as one of the greatest threats to housing in 2019. The Wall Street Journal has been taking a strong interest in this as well. And they've been following the fact that the stock market overheated in the pandemic and that foreign investment firms and foreign pension firms and United States investment firms are taking a huge swath of housing and purchasing it. This is the new hot investment market. New York Times Magazine also ran a similar story about this. And obviously, Wall Street Journal is continuing to track Blackstone. A group called the Anti-Eviction Project has also been tracking purchases of by Wall Street in California in particular. And as you can see, there's terrific density of purchasing, especially in the Sacramento area and San Francisco area. But look also at what is going on Los Angeles to San Diego. And again, they've tracked who's doing the buying, and you can see some of the top investment firms that are doing this. So SB9 and 10, as you've heard, will accelerate some of this. It's very attractive to investors and not as usable by actual homeowners. So we don't need to do any more handing out. We don't need to feed billionaires. What we really would like to see is some effort to stop and mitigate the displacement of California residents that are increasingly forced to compete with institutional investors. Some of you have asked questions in the Q&A window. Please keep them coming. We will do a Q&A session. You're asking about short-term vacation rentals, vacation rental by owners. Yes, all of that. That takes supply off the market and drives prices higher. Housing is for humans. We should not be competing with investment firms for a place to sleep and live. So we're going to organize for action now, and what you will do will make a difference. There are almost 1,000 people on this call, and if every single one of you took at least one action, you would create a wave that legislators would feel, and it would make a difference in how this vote is going to come out. So let me walk you through it. So Senate Bill 9 and 10 are part of a package of bills from the Senate leadership for housing. And those bills have gone through the Senate and been passed by the Senate, and they are presently now in the Assembly. The Assembly does not share the same priorities as the Senate. So this is the place to try to make a difference. The Assembly is currently at home on recess. And while they're at home, this is a very good time to contact them. The people on this call are from across the state. I would be willing to bet there are at least some people on this call from every single district of the 80 in the state. The job now is to make sure that we contact these legislators. They will be back August 16th. So the window is short. We've got about a one and a half week window before they go back. There are 80 representatives in the Assembly, and they only need 41 votes to pass these bills. Last year, they got 43 on the then equivalent of Senate Bill 9. That bill only failed to a midnight technicality on the very last day of the session, which is why it's been reintroduced. So the job here is to stop from getting to 41. A no vote recorded, which is an abstention, is as good as a no vote. We just need to not get to 41 ayes. September 10th is the last day for bills to be passed in their respective houses before they are sent on to the governor. September 14th is the recall election, and many of you have been asking, how does this play? Oh, it completely plays. The governor is feeling a lot of pressure over that recall election. October 10th is the last day for the bills to be signed or vetoed by the governor. So this is the window that we're working within. And right now, where we are is while the Assembly reps are at home, we want you to contact them. We're going to show you some useful tools on how to do that. So the easiest thing to do, and we want you to do this at your level of comfort. And if you do one of these things, two of these things, five of these things, all of it matters. There is no contribution too small at this point. So the easy thing to do is call the district office for your assembly representative. Well, how do you find them if you don't know who it is? Thankfully, the legislature puts up a site called Find Your Rep, and you can just plug in your address and your zip code, and it will find your representative. You can see here that it pulls up my state senator and my assembly member. Now, my state senator already voted with us because these bills have already gone through the Senate, and I thank her for that, for supporting her community. They're now in the assembly, so I want to contact my assembly member, Steve Bennett. So if I click on that, it will go right to his website. And we have learned from legislators that when you contact them through their website, their staff has a tendency to prioritize those contacts. That is their constituents reaching out directly to them, and they want to hear from their constituents. So this is really important that you go through their website. And you also have the opportunity to call, and you can see that my assembly rep listed a number where you could call him. If you click on the contact me, it will take you straight through to his website, and it will let you fill out a form that will let him know that you have these concerns. Our rep is very good about getting back to us. I'm given to understand they're not all the same. You also can use a website called stopsb9.org. This was put together by the statewide team that organized today's call. This is a really easy website to use. All you do is click that Act Now, and it will create a form letter for you. Again, you're going to tell them where your assembly rep is by your zip code, and it will actually pull up a nice little form for you to fill out, and it will pre-generate a letter for you. It gives you a good subject matter, so the assembly rep receiving this email knows exactly what's going on here. And you have the option to be able to custom edit this form to make this more your voice. If you have time, and we'd sure love you to do it, if your legislator is already on board with you, and believe us, we've talked to some legislators across the state, there are some going the right way here, which is great. So what we need to do is reach out to other legislators. So the easy way to do that is to call their district office. And again, the legislature puts up a website here where you can see every single legislator across the state, what their district is and where their district offices are with phone numbers. If all you do is make a phone call and leave a message and say, I just really want to encourage you not to vote for SB9 and 10, that is a great thing to do. Some of you are much more comfortable using social media than making phone calls. That's fine. So again, at the level of your comfort, do what's comfortable for you. Nextdoor is a great place to be able to have conversations with people in your community and wake them up to what's going on with these bills if they had not even heard of them. And I guarantee you, a lot of people have still not heard of them, as much press as there's been. So this is a graphic that Livable California put together, and it's pretty easy to understand, and it has gone up on Nextdoor in various communities. And this is a great, way to have people see, what that can't happen here because we have CC&Rs or we're a homeowners association. No, it can happen here. Facebook is also a really good venue to be able to put up videos and share them around. And this goes wider than your community. Obviously, this goes to your friends and family across the state. So this is a great way to reach out to people in other districts and kind of get them going. Twitter is the one that is watched actually by a lot of the representatives. And the reason it's watched is because many of them are on it. So Twitter allows you to put up some content. It allows you to, put together the pitch about it. And the nice thing about Twitter is it lets you tag subject matters. It's called hashtagging, right? So this is SB9 and 10. And that means that if you go on Twitter and search for #SB9 or #SB10, you will see all the tweets that have been written about it. It also lets you tag legislators and the governor directly so that what you post will show up in their feed. For legislators and for the governor, their staffers watch their Twitter feeds. And obviously, this is a bit of a measure of public pulse for them. So it's a really good tool to use. If you're willing to spread your reach, teach 5 of your friends to do the same thing and ask them to teach 5 friends. And a really easy starting point is just to email around the United Neighbors video. We have a toolkit that you'll be able to download that has all of these live links in them. So this will be a really easy thing for you to walk through. And I have to tell you, this is one that surprises a lot of people, but letters to the editor are huge. This is often one of the most read sections of news media. Local news media have really taken on the chin over the last 2 decades, and it's really hard for them to get content. Letters to the editor are content you supply, and they have a tendency to get a lot of eyeballs, which makes newspapers happy. So as you can see, these are some sample letters to the editor. This one came from South San Francisco. Here's one in the LA Times, which asks a question that many of you have been asking, which is, where's the water? That's a very good question to be asking. And here's one by Julie Testa, who's on with us today, and she's the vice mayor of Pleasanton, and she ran a good guest op-ed in the Pleasanton Weekly. So this is a good way to expand your reach. Many of you are articulate and able to write a good, succinct set of points that your local papers would like to run. Now, this is a good one too. If your local media is not running fair and balanced stories, right? If they're running one-sided stories, and we have seen that in some media, you can contact them and say, I'd like you to hear the other side of the story. You also can do exactly what we're doing with you this morning. You can put a town hall together, and several of you have asked me where the recall candidates stand on this. We've only seen one debate so far. We've only seen 2 candidates answer. Now's a good opportunity to do a town hall. Again, free parking, no exposure to Delta, easy to attend. And you can ask the recall candidates, what are your positions on housing? We want to hear from you and on these bills. And you can also do your own press conference or video. There is a group out of Sacramento. They are fierce advocates for their neighborhood. They have a town hall that we helped put together for them with their assembly rep. It did not go well. He was not responsive to them. So they turned around the following week and they did a press conference on the Capitol steps to make it absolutely clear the problems that they have with these bills. And you've seen Lynetta McElroy's video, and Lynetta's had a couple thousand hits on that video, and it's clearly gone far wider than her community of Leimert Park. So these are also good tools that you can use if you're comfortable widening your reach. Always keep the governor, contact the governor, contact the governor, contact the governor. No matter what else you do that. This is the last backstop. He can either sign these bills or veto them. So this is super important. What do I say when I contact? I've decided I'm going to participate. I've decided I'm going to contact my legislator. What do I say? These are very simple points you can use. Again, this is in the toolkit. So we need affordable housing, not developer and investor handouts. We need to stop displacing Californians out of lower rent and lower price units. Stop gentrification. Please protect our diverse communities. This is a key one. The story on the right here is the front page of the New York Times from a month ago. Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara came out very clearly and said he did not feel that the state could support continuing to build in the high wildfire zones any longer. As you see with buying housing, financial markets are typically very ahead of the game here. They've already decided that the state goes on fire on a regular basis. They're not going to provide insurance policies in the high wildfire zones. So why in the world are we pushing more people into them? And Senate Bill 9 actively promotes that. It actively promotes building in the high wildfire zones. You can also say, to your legislator, hey, if you're trying to look like you're doing something on housing with these bills, here's what you're really doing. You're just going to create more upmarket housing. You're going to drive prices higher. And that is exactly what investors and developers want to get the highest rate of return. If you really want to end single family neighborhoods in California, then let's just be honest about it. Let's get that discussion out on the table. You can also say, look, we know we need more housing. We do not have a luxury housing crisis. We have an affordable housing crisis. Here's how we can get to yes. How about some more of these good post-pandemic housing tools? United Neighbors walked you through some of them, like Senate Bill 15, Senate Bill 6, and Senate Bill 621, which died, unfortunately, but was a very good idea, which is to take old motor court hotels that are run down and convert them to homeless housing. Let's have more tools like that. There's a lot of vacant land owned by state, county, and municipalities, and even public agencies like the Mass Transit District here in Santa Barbara. Can we use those vacant spaces to build affordable housing? If we're going to densify, let's do it around urban cores and real transportation hubs, not just you're half a mile from a bus stop and therefore you're a transportation hub. We need to preserve our open spaces because you're going to need them with density. And as we've talked before, it reduces the heat island problem. Can the state do anything to protect us from investors and short-term vacation rental predators who overbid us and lock out California residents from even getting a home? And can we work together on solutions that get to yes, rather than having top-down imposed dictates? Thank you very much for agreeing to spend your Saturday morning with us and learning about this. I'm now going to turn this back to Bea, and she's going to facilitate a Q&A session with you.
All right, thank you so much, Sharon. Appreciate that. And also at this point, I just want to conclude that those of us who are local representatives, based on what's going on, we've dived into the details. We know about these bills. And the last thing we want to be is in a position where we cannot help our residents because there's a bulldozer right next door to them. And we have to tell them, I'm sorry, my hands are tied by the state legislature. I cannot help you. So this is something which you need to get involved in. That's why we're bringing it to the people, because we've done everything and our efforts have not carried the day. So there are, just so you know, some people working on a constitutional amendment that would have to probably be brought as a proposition to prohibit these kinds of bills from overriding local zoning laws, but we don't have that tool yet. And there was a bill proposed by my assembly person, ACA 7, but that's not going anywhere because, frankly, as Cindy Montañez said, they're not interested in curtailing their power. They need to hear from you, and you need to get up in there and say, you're there in Sacramento to represent me and not to represent real estate developers and investors. So we're going to talk about some questions that have come up in the chat. So if you don't feel your questions have been addressed, and keep putting it at the bottom of the chat, we're going to try to go through and address as many of them as possible with the time we have. But there's been several questions that have been put in the chat about infrastructure. The short answer is that developers are not required to pay for infrastructure in these bills. And that means obviously could be new taxes and as Dan Carrick said, or services diminish. But Lynetta McElroy wants to address some of those specifics as she sees it from her standpoint.
I just wanted to make mention this clear, to be clear. The developers want to come into the neighborhoods because they do not have to pay for improved infrastructure. That is why they want to go into the neighborhoods, destroy our neighborhoods, rather than to just build on the commercial corridors. Because if they build on the commercial corridors, they will have to improve the infrastructure. So let's think about how they are willing to destroy a neighborhood unnecessarily because they will save some money. And who will pay for that infrastructure? You and I.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And there's been various things that have been related about infrastructure. These are serious, serious problems that are going to be thrust on the communities that when you don't have enough water, you don't have enough sewer space, you don't have areas for schools to have this population. And there's a whole host of things that unfortunately taxpayers in the communities may be required to pay for because there's nothing that the developers that ordinarily would be required to put these costs in and into their cost of development. We don't have that. There's been questions, and I know that several have already talked about it, about whether there's any studies that have been produced regarding low price housing for those that are now overcrowded or homeless. You can look at online. There's a lot of different things. I want to point out to you something, just a general principle, because a lot of people may think that if we just produce more housing, then with more supply, it will meet the demand and then somehow prices will go down. That's something people studied in economics class, the law of supply and demand. That does not work with housing. And if you want to, and if that was the case, then you all know that Manhattan would be the cheapest place to live because it is density to the max, but it's has the highest rents and it costs the most to buy housing in Manhattan and New York City. Another thing you can look up, if you just Google Patrick Condon, C-O-N-D-O-N, Vancouver, that will lead you to a whole bunch of articles. This man was a land use planner in Vancouver, British Columbia. He believed at the time that just creating more units would drive prices down and make housing more affordable for people. And he is now eaten crow, so to speak, and is now a person who's going out and saying, I was wrong, this does not work, and now Vancouver is one of the most expensive places to live, both to buy and to rent. So the answer is that no, just creating new units is not going to do it, and it's going to drive up the price per square foot. So it doesn't help families with a growing family that need room and space for their children, a yard for them to play in that's safe. They can watch their kids while mom is doing dishes and know that they're safe. It destroys all of that. So with regard to, I think we crossed a little bit about CC&Rs. They do not protect, because the laws of the land, unless there's a constitutional amendment, override any inconsistent law. And so a court could decide, obviously homeowners associations can go to court, but they have to decide, the courts will decide which prevails. And the intent of these bills is to provide for everybody, other than a few exceptions. So then with respect to other solutions, I think there were discussed some by Maria and Jeff Calvin of things that have done but could be done, and by Sharon as well. There was a question legally about lot splits, and in going over these two bills with Dan Carrig, we both are, it's all about the words. And as an attorney for the past 40 years, I've been on legislative committees for over 30 years. And you have to look to the language, because it's the language in the bills that will control. Courts will look to what the bills say. And if it's clear in the bill, they're not going to look and see what was the legislative intent. It's going to go according to that. But there's been some requests made of the legislature to tie up the language, to make it more clear so it's not vague, but there's still a lot of vagueness that could be interpreted, and the legislature apparently wants that, because they don't want to clear it up. They've been asked to, and they haven't. So with respect to that, that means in the lot splits, there's some vague language there too that could be interpreted to create the ability on larger lots for more than just 2 lots, despite what they're saying. So again, when you look at language and it talks about existing lot and then saying two newly created parcels, then you have different language. So this is some of the things that we are looking for. As far as the governor's recall and its effect, unfortunately, due to the timing of this recall election, the governor could hold these bills and pass them after that election. So obviously he still needs to be contacted to say no. He would, if he actually doesn't get recalled, he would have to sit for re-election in 2022. So definitely that is something that needs to be communicated to him, that this is important to you if what you've heard is alarming to you. And I want to open up to some of my panel members to excuse me, to answer some of these questions that have come up in the chat. There was a question about whether these apply only to incorporated cities. Absolutely not. So we keep talking about local communities, because there's unincorporated areas. So your jurisdiction that would make decisions would be the county. And so this affects everyone all over the state. That's why this is a statewide effort, because people who are not in your area will be deciding what your neighborhood looks like through these 2 bills. So does anybody have any additional information they want to do? Please hold your hand up and then we can go for that. Yes, Sharon.
This is coming up a lot in the chat. People are asking, is this video going to be available? Are these presentations going to be available? You know, are they going to be able to get access to? Yes, we will make them available. We will either put them up on the United Neighbors website, Livable California website. This presentation, this video is being recorded. We will make that publicly available. So folks that are concerned or want to have access to the tools that were presented today, we will absolutely make those available to you.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that, Sharon. I know I said it a while back, but we have some people that are still joining and may not have heard that. I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead, Maria.
We just want to emphasize that we are not trying to stop housing, affordable housing, from being built. We're saying that there's lots of alternatives and good alternatives to get that kind of housing. And with the right funding, it can help cities get affordable housing. So we want to make that clear. We're not about shutting everything down, but we do feel that you do not need to hurt single family neighborhoods in order to get that done. So that was my comment.
All right, thank you. That is important. Yes, and Councilmember Montañez.
I also want to address like a couple of questions on historic homes. So like I said, City of San Fernando, August 31st, we celebrate 110 years. And I'll give you an example. There's a home being listed in the city built in 1905. As you see, we did a historic resources survey, back when I was on the city council the first time, and it identified all these historic homes in San Fernando. And they exist throughout so many beautiful communities in California, around Los Angeles. There is not going to be any protection given to these homes. And I'll give you this example, this home being listed. And the first thing that it says is like, attention investors, not attention homeowners or families. You could buy this beautiful home. It literally says, attention investors. Here's an 11,000 square foot lot that you could subdivide. You could add in additional investments. That's what it's about. There's not going to be any protection. It's just people, they're already doing it. There's so much vacancy in properties throughout California. We have homes that the banks are holding onto. We have homes where they're being purchased by not individuals. They're being purchased by companies, investors. They're holding on to them. They come in, they cut up the house as much as possible, and they go back in and they put the house on the market for an exorbitant price that is unaffordable for people that live in communities throughout the state. So this is absolutely not about protecting any of our historic neighborhoods. This is not going to protect, people's like their investments. It's not about that. It's all driven by people, just investors, companies wanting to make money. And so that's just one thing that it's just clear. And all this bill, these two bills, all they do, they just empower what's already going on across the state. And it's unacceptable. And that's why we have to stop these bills.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That is such an important point. We've gotten, there were some questions people are asking, like, is it possible to downzone after upzoning? I mean, no. I mean, if you already have a building that's been built there, or there's even plans that have been approved, if this is the law, and even if it got reversed later, then you're not going to be able to legally remove those buildings or prevent those plans because they were legal when they were approved. And so that's the problem. That's why we have to stop this from even happening from the get-go. And so a constitutional amendment would help if we have backing and support for that, to have it on the ballot as a proposition that takes money. Because quite frankly, this is going to keep coming. It has been coming and it's gotten worse. Then there's also been a question about local officials that are behind this. Let me just tell you that there's a group, it's called California Cities for Local Control, and the organizer and president of that association has over 500 local electeds. And what these bills do is they cut against what we call local control. Local control meaning that we are able to control what happens to you in your community by listening to you, our residents, and we have accountability to you, because you can just come to us. We live in your neighborhood. You could, come down to our house even and say, hey, this is important to me. And we address it as we're concerned. You are our neighbors. These bills remove local control, and every elected official in the state of California is concerned about that. And the League of California Cities, albeit not a sponsor of this town hall, is an active organization, statewide, that has been pushing for local control, so that we as your representatives can do what is safe in our communities and what is best for our communities based on what we hear from you, our residents. So that's the whole position. That's why zoning laws are local. This is a step, an overreach by the legislature to say, oh, we're not going to declare this is a statewide problem, so we're going to dictate to you what you do at the local level. And many of them have never seen your community. They have no idea the trauma they're inflicting on your community. So that's something that you need to know. And we're just putting that out there for you. If you feel free to check it out. We've looked at these bills. I personally don't see anyone that's being helped other than real estate developers and investors, because they're certainly not helping the low income people. There's no requirement for affordable housing here. So that's a problem, because we're still required to zone for that. We've got obligations to where is it going to come from if all these areas are being snapped up by market developers. And all these people that want to buy the homes who have to get a loan because they're not independently wealthy and can make cash offers are preempted from doing that. So it's just not fair. And so I don't want to be in a situation where people say, how come I never knew about this? Why didn't I hear about this? Why I had a chance to stop this? We're here to tell you, and you need to tell everybody in the state of California that you know, because we got to make sure that these people hear the concerns you have, and you need to bring it to them. Because as a former assembly member, Cindy Montañez said, they will listen because bottom line is they want to stay in office. So there's anybody have another question they want to address here regarding some of the issues? Some of them are duplicative here.
Folks are asking repeatedly about the governor's position on these bills. Does anybody want to speak to that?
Well, I think so far we are aware that he tends to be supportive of more housing. So it looks like he will sign these bills unless he hears better alternatives and more concern from all of us. And that's what we need to do. But right now, we're not feeling comfortable that he understands the issues that concern a lot of us.
Yeah, and I would concur with that. He has been a proponent of these kinds of bills, and there's really not a lot of explanation. Things have been put out. Well, we need more housing, so we're just going to create market rate housing here, and without any type of analysis about, is this really going to make housing more affordable for people? It will not. You're not going to be able to buy the same square footage you have now to get space for your family if these bills are passed, because anytime you make a piece of land more dense with more units, it becomes more valuable and they can charge more for it. So that's the reality. So that's where we are, and that's why we're trying to put that out there to you. And we're going to put out, I guess there's been some question about the PowerPoints. We're going to work to try to get those available as well so that you can have the information. And in the meantime, there's issues here. As far as I know, SB10 does not require any height limits, or somebody asking about that. Now, just so you know, SB10 is different only in the sense that it's not mandatory like SB9 is. But given where the legislature has been going, and I know Dan Carrick mentioned a current bill, it's called AB 215, which should also be objected to. This bill would make cities responsible not just for zoning for affordable housing, which we're required to do for the low and very low income brackets, but we would be responsible for the production of that housing. Even though we don't put shovels in the ground, we don't build houses, we don't have the money to do, we don't use our tax dollars to build affordable housing. The state legislature used to provide money to cities. It was called redevelopment funds. They cut all that out. So they've been making, dictating, you must do this, but they're not giving any money for this. And I think Dan Carrig may have touched on this, but you cannot build affordable housing without some form of subsidy. The developers do not build that because it doesn't, what they call, pencil out for them. It doesn't make a profit for them. So there needs to be some governmental subsidy, and cities don't have the funds to do that. Some cities may have a little bit of money, but certainly not to the extent that they're required to be zoned for, and the numbers are very high. So it puts cities in a box, and that's why you need to know so that you can help your city representatives, which helping us helps you, because we are here to serve you and your interests. And unfortunately, sometimes when people go to Sacramento, they forget about what's going on here, and we never forget. So I just want to let you know. Yes.
See, this is coming up a lot too in the Q&A. So there's a gift here on offer if we'll just take it. These bills have had the power to do what seemingly nothing else can do, which is transcend partisanship. It is uniting people of all stripes against this bill, right? It's way beyond that. What you see when you attend the committee hearings where these bills have been heard is you see incredible financial forces pushing for them. So Facebook continually pushes for them, Cal Chamber, California Building and Industry Association. You will see significant, Silicon Valley leadership groups, Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. That is who is very, very pro these bills. Who you see continually on these calls, opposing these bills is Leimert Park, small communities, cities, city council members, neighbors who are very concerned about being pushed out of their own communities, right? So what you are seeing here is not a partisan issue. You are seeing financial forces against little neighborhoods. That is really kind of how this is stacking up. So it is a very different issue than I think what we have seen before, but it has pulled a lot of people together. And like I say, transcended all sort of party lines. People from all stripes are concerned about this. So we should take the gift of that and run with it, and look to do things here. If we can all work together to get to some yeses, where we could get some solutions that would benefit communities, help reduce homelessness, not create more of it, and then not destroy people's ability to acquire intergenerational family wealth by being able to buy a home in a neighborhood that they might have even grown up in. So we want to kind of look at this issue very differently. Than it's not partisan. It's really big financial interests against you, the little neighbor. But you, the little neighbor, have a very powerful thing, and that is your vote and your voice. And that is why we want to encourage you to use both of those things very strongly right now. Legislators are coming back August 16th. The time to get them is right now when they're at home in their districts. And remember, do not forget to contact the governor. Be sure to contact the governor, right? The more you can raise your voice, the more powerful this is. And 1,000 people on a Zoom call could do a whole lot. So we're hoping to see like a very big wave across the state in this next week, and to really flip the tide on these bills.
Yes, thank you for that. That's a very important point. And we've been getting some questions in the Q&A regarding accessory dwelling units, ADUs, and the impact on this. Just so you know, several years ago, the legislature did the same thing that they're doing here. They made it ministerial, which, as Dan Carrig explains, means local officials have no control. They have to approve it if it meets the parameters of the law. So that was what was applied for the accessory dwelling units and the junior accessory dwelling units, which we are required to permit if it meets the requirements. And there's very minor setbacks for these ADUs, and that's like 4 feet from the property line. So those are already in place. So you have to understand, when you add then SB9 and SB10, these are already mandatory, these ADUs. And so this is an additional layer of housing that is being added on top of that. And so when you read this and you think, oh, it's only 4 units in SB9. No, it's not only 4 units, because you have a right under those ADU laws to take an existing single family dwelling and add an ADU and a junior ADU to that. And then you can then split that single family dwelling into, so there's 2 units there instead of 1. So you've got 4 units on the one lot for people, for separate families that used to only have 1. And then after that, you can split the lot and create at least 2 more units on that. So that makes 6. So the minimum is 6. And then the same thing with SB10. It refers to 10 units, which could be like a mini apartment building next door to your house. But it's really 14 because there's ADUs and the junior ADUs that are added to that. So those are some of the things that you need to be aware of that are not mentioned in the bills. If you read them, you won't see it because they're already laws, and people who know housing know that these laws still apply. So there was a question asked about more specifics about bills such as AB 215, which Dan Carrick and I have referred to. The ways that the legislature would use that bill like that to coerce cities to employ things like SB 10, if it's passed, even though it's quote unquote not mandatory, is under what we call the regional housing needs assessment. Each city is allocated a certain number of housing units that they must zone for. It is a very large number for the city because they've just come up with a number, and most cities aren't able to really figure out where they're going to be able to zone for this housing. What AB 215 does, it says that you're not just required to zone for it, you now are required and are responsible for producing a certain percentage of this housing. And if you don't have the required percentage of housing actually being built in your city, then we are able to tell you we're not going to approve your housing element. This is a requirement by the state. We have to have an approved housing element. If we don't, a city can be fined up to $100,000 a month, which is $10,000 a day for each day they're not in compliance and don't have an approved housing element. And the Attorney General's office can sue the city and get several times more that amount. So these are the situation that cities are in, to explain to you how these bills can tie in, so that something that doesn't look mandatory can soon become something that the cities will not be able to not do, because even if their residents come and protest it. And I don't know if Councilmember Montañez has some information on that in terms of how that's worked in her city.
Yeah, so these regional housing needs, the assessment that's done and the mandate, they're unattainable for most cities. You know, let's take my little city. We are 27,000 people, and our regional housing need assessment came back to say we almost have to build 2,000 units. I mean, in a 2.5 square mile town, where are we going to fit 2,000 units? It's just not realistic. And, you know, you're competing against the needs, the infrastructure needs. Like, there's only so much, you know, the water pipes that run underneath, you know, the streets, and sewer lines, and like the streets. I mean, almost every city, it has like streets and sidewalks that are broken and haven't been repaired. I mean, those of us that live in, you know, in areas like Los Angeles, geez, like you go anywhere and we have broken streets and sidewalks everywhere, trees that haven't been touched in over 30 years. And, you know, there's just a lack of inability for cities to maintain even like adequate resources for existing housing units by adding more and not adding in money for streets and sidewalks and sewer and water, and everything else that we have to take care of as city councils is irresponsible. It doesn't make sense. People are living in this reality that doesn't exist except in Sacramento, in that Capitol building, because the reality of us that are running cities at the local level is we do not have enough resources, sufficient resources to maintain our current needs for streets and sidewalks and water systems and sewer systems and lighting, electricity, all the basics. So if legislators are elected, everybody says we're going to go out there and we're going to fight to improve the quality of life of people. Well, they're not doing it if they're voting for these bills. The right thing to do is to push for additional resources to go into funding the basic needs of cities, and then also ensuring that housing is affordable, available in the right locations. I think Jeff and Maria, what you were talking about makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of underutilized spaces. The reason they're not pushing to go there is because it's more expensive land, and they want to come to areas, our homes, which they could afford to take from us, purchase or buy from us, than going into areas where they could continue to increase, density where it's appropriate. So there's definitely a different approach that the legislature and the governor could come up with if they actually spent more time talking to people like all of you. The 1,000 of you that have joined have ideas, your neighborhoods, the kind of quality of life you want to have, the issues. And people, the legislature and the governor need to spend more time talking to people like you so that they understand the right approach to how we, actually build housing, affordability, and all the things we all want. We as Californians, we as Americans, we want to take care of each other. We want to make sure all communities are nice. None of us like to see this overcrowding, highly dense, communities that sometimes are located right adjacent to where we live or a few blocks away or in our neighborhood. And the reality is that those are the neighborhoods where we always say, oh, well, these are the disadvantaged communities. These are the communities with high crime. These are the communities, where all these issues exist. The government created that. They created all of that. So we should not allow that. We should continue to build in a way that promotes first and foremost decency and respect and dignity for everyone. And that means that we live in neighborhoods where we have affordable housing, high quality housing, space, ability to have, a connection to nature, open space. Yes, the option is going to continue to exist for multifamily, larger apartments. Some people want to live in in an area like that. That's okay, but don't force it on all of us. Don't force it. Don't take away our R1 zoning. Single family, do not take away R2 zoning. Respect what has existed in communities literally for hundreds of years, 110 years in San Fernando, and it's worked. Poor people can buy and own a house in our community. Why do they want to destroy that? And only allow for certain people to come in and make money off of it. And again, I'll tell you, in one generation, my parents went from extreme poverty in one generation to all 6 of us graduating from college, grandchildren going to college. Everybody that is of age and has graduated from college owns their home. They did all of that because they had equity to take equity out of their home to pay for college. Back then, UCLA wasn't so expensive. So all they had to do was take out, $10,000 or less, right? They could take out a few $1,000s and we could pay for college, and we went to college and we pay it back. I mean, why are we taking that dream away from people? For what?
If I could pick up on what Cindy is saying, there is so much land in our commercial areas that can be developed. And our commercial corridors are basically ugly. And they're parking lots, and they're hot, and they're not walkable. With the right encouragement and working with local communities, we can get developers to build mixed income housing, great places to walk, events along to Promenade 2, and turn these ugly commercial streets into beautiful grand boulevards so that we can all enjoy a better, richer, more walkable, more friendly community. It's all doable, but let's focus on doing what's right and not focus on doing what's wrong for all the wrong reasons. Do right for the right reasons, and we can have a great, great, beautiful city. And
yes,
state.
Thank you. That's a very important point. And there were bills. People are asking, aren't there alternatives? There were bills that would provide using commercial zones and providing cities with some money, because the commercial zones were how cities were making money to be able to give services to their residents by sales tax that was being produced by the commercial businesses that were in those units. So, but none of those, that bill has not passed. And there was another bill that was proposed by the Contract Cities Association to try to make a situation where adjoining communities could, if a community had some money, but they didn't have land to be able to zone for affordable housing, they could give some of their money to help an adjoining community that had land available to build that affordable housing, because the state wasn't giving any money. And this would be a win-win situation to try to help produce housing. That bill was pushed into a 2-year bill and has not gone forward. So just to let you know, I agree. What we need to reinforce with the legislature is that people in California want to have a choice. It's not okay to say you have no choice to live in a single family neighborhood, regardless of the needs of your family, the need for a yard, the need for a relative peace and quiet because you have fewer neighbors. You can have your kids play on the sidewalk without getting run over from all of the cars on the street. But people in Sacramento are trying to eliminate that choice. And they want to say, no, your only choice is going to be dense and denser. And there's not going to be any way that you should be able to have these single family dwellings because we've decided that you don't deserve them. So that's really where we are. There are some vacant units. People are building market rate and people are not renting them because they're too high priced. So it's not an issue that we don't have housing. We don't have enough affordable housing. And that's a big difference. So that's why we need to unite together to try to address these. There's ideas going forth that can address the need for affordable housing, but the people in Sacramento have to be willing to work with us to do that. And so far, your elected officials have been trying, but now it's up to you. So we're passing the baton to you to take it to the next level so that we can further the interests of you when we try to petition the representatives in Sacramento. So is there any other questions we need to address? I've been trying to monitor.
B, we really want the state to just stop throwing more and more bills at us and get everybody, all the stakeholders together. Let's look at the problem. Let's figure out good solutions and get it done. Otherwise, we're going to be on this for years and years and never do what has to happen. So I think they just have to slow down and get us all in the same room and solving the problem.
Yes, I agree. And as far as that is concerned, I don't know if we're trying to touch on everything that has been addressed in the chat. And there's been a lot of similar questions, but this discussion is not over. I just want to say that you need to continue. It's not just this coming week before they come back. The pressure needs to be kept up as they're back because they, as Sharon described, they have several weeks after they come back from the recess to continue to work on the bills. And last year, I just need to let you know, the predecessor bill to SB9, which was SB 1120, actually passed in the assembly. And there was a lot of pressure. Yeah, and the only thing that kept it from going out and being a law that the governor could sign was it was 3 minutes before the legislative deadline, and it had to go back to the Senate for some minor amendments. That's the only reason, because there had enough votes, but it was 3 minutes before the deadline, and it couldn't make it back to the Senate in time. So it appears that the legislature is not wanting that to happen again, and they're going to try to push it. So unless they hear from you, that's what they've intended to do. And I would be remiss if I didn't, try to let everybody know as much as I could. So please push it out. We're not reaching the entire state, but it's up to you to put out this information to everybody because together we can do this. And that's we have to have that attitude, because this is our state, and we want to protect our communities and be able to have input at the local level where people know what the needs of our community are, and they're not by people who've never seen your community, don't know the issues, don't know some of the dangers that would occur if these bills would pass. So again,
Excuse me, Pete, could I just make mention? I just want everyone to know that in most counties, the assembly district offices are actually open and that they can have about 6 persons to come in. So I would suggest you and 5 others just go down to your assembly district, and you may have to sit there for a moment, but you have a right, as long as that's fine with your county health department. You can go down and talk directly with your assembly person, or at least for their housing or legislative district person, and talk to them for 20 minutes. And you may want to leave them with a little information written down for them, but that would be a very effective tool to go eye to eye with your district director in the office. Thanks.
yes, thank you, Lynetta. That's great. And Maria and Jeff, if you could put out some information about what you're doing through your organization, how people can follow you, that would be great. And any other organizations that you'd recommend that they be able to get more information and assistance on this. Can you do that?
Yeah, no problem.
All right, will you tell us now?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, first of all, we do have a website that they can go to, and all of the things we have done many, many presentations throughout the state. So unitedneighbors.net is a source of all kinds of information. All our organizations really work together to help each other, to spread the word out. It is just very critical. And going back to your comment about last year, those numbers, the majority did not come through until about 2 minutes before 12. And the only reason it happened is because the pressure on these few people was so intense that they finally voted yes. And the only way we can help counter that is make sure that we give our legislators the backing they need to actually stand up to that pressure, because it's intense in Sacramento. It is not an easy job. And if they don't hear from us, they will not stand up against that wall of opposition. So,
yes, and I think it would be helpful for Cindy Montañez to explain what it's like up there in a little bit, just a real brief snippet, because that's the reality that needs to be countered. So to make it happen for us.
Exactly. I mean, these bills, especially the ones that are the more controversial, because there's all of people across the state that are pushing for something to get done. What happens is that the lobbyists are literally in the halls of the Capitol. They're lobbying, they're pushing, they're calling, they're sending text messages, they're advocating, they're calling in the legislator, they're calling in the staff to put pressure on them to vote for a bill, while the rest of us are going to sleep. Right. Because this stuff is happening at 9, 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. So we also have to be aware that, that our pressure has to continue all the way till the end, because things are constantly moving, and people that want this, especially big money interests, they will sometimes add even more lobbyists at the end for the last few hours. People that have never been working on it, but because they're trying to get those 41 votes, and if they know that they count the votes, they will know we have already talked to X amount of legislators, and these are the ones that are with us. We have to have that same understanding. We have talked to, of the 80 members of the legislature, we need to know exactly how many we've talked to, how many have told us yes, how many have told us they're undecided, how many have told us no. And those people that are undecided, that's where our pressure should go. Keep pushing them that they're undecided, have 1,000 of us plus more reach out to them and say, we want you to vote no on these 2 bills. For these reasons, we have voters in your district, we live in your district. That's what needs to happen all the way through. So right. we should all circle in with our legislators, our assembly members, our senators, and then report back out. I can tell you, my assembly member, you name that assembly member, has told me they're going to vote for the bill, they're going to vote against for the bill, or they're undecided. Okay, so that's what we have to focus on. and we have to do it all the way through. And there's going to be all of us signing up, whether United Neighbors or however we're going to get the information, and get updates to say the bill is being taken up right now at this time on the floor of the assembly for a vote. These are the people that have voted yes. These are the people that are still undecided. And when we know who those undecideds are, we just target and we call and we send messages and we do social media. We put the pressure. That's what they're doing inside the halls of the Capitol, except they're getting paid thousands of dollars to do this. We just have to do it from like our passion and our love for our communities and for the things that we want to see in our neighborhoods. And it's really that one day that, I mean, all of these days matter, but the biggest day is the day that the vote is taken up.
Right.
But let's keep the pressure. That's how it works. That's the reality of it. It's a lot of pressure that gets put on legislators by the big money interests. I mean, that's the reality. And we have to be putting pressure as active, concerned voters in this state.
And B, if I can add, United Neighbors started in January with all the groups that had joined us, and we've been pushing all those groups to make sure they write position papers and contact their legislators. So we have done a lot of that work, but at this point, each and every one of our group members are now reaching out to all their neighbors, and now we need all of you, the army of people we have, to come forward and do what we've been doing for the last 5 months, trying to push better legislation.
Yes, I agree. And some people in the chat or Q&A are talking about putting out and letting people know about livablecalifornia.org. That's another website that has a lot of important information, and sharing their Twitter address, which is at livableca. And I know that Maria and Jeff, apparently someone noted that you don't have your Twitter address on your website.
Right, it's UN_California, and that's our Twitter. We'd love people to get on it.
Okay, and it's California spelled out?
Yes.
Okay, okay. And then there's a brief question asking obviously about a reference in SB10 about being able to employ this particular bill in areas that are within a half mile of transit. There's some details of that, and you can find it in another section, but basically half mile of transit can mean a bus stop that has regular visits during peak hours, like every 15 minutes, that type of thing. So it doesn't exclude much, if any, area as far as where SB10 could be employed. And of course, SB9 is even more inclusive. And there is some exception for historic homes, but you got to remember that these are not just historic in a generic sense. They're historic, that they've been defined as under the historic register. There's some requirements, so there's not going to be a lot of exclusion about that. If somebody wants to address that, we had some questions about the historic.
I can address that. In South Los Angeles, we have it's called Jefferson Park and West Adams. That we have the highest number of HPOZs, historic preservation overlay zones. Most of the homes are at least 100 years old. The HPOZ exception is for a home that is on the federal registry and some issues of the state registry. That does not mean the block, that does not mean the particular area. So just because one has a home in HPOZ, historically preserved overlay zone, you're still right to have your home damaged, taken away. And I just want to make this mention. Remember when we talk about environmentalism? Well, remember the homes that will be destroyed, they will go to the landfill. So we're talking about homes that are 180 years old with asbestos and all kinds of other kinds of contaminants. Once they're opened, that's when they become dangerous. As long as they're within paint, several layers of paint, there's not much of a problem. So these homes, if 9 and 10 are voted on, the homes will be crushed, taken to the landfill, and the trees, if there are trees that are grown along the parkway, those will be taken down immediately, because that is for the egress and ingress of the construction vehicles. So if you are interested in the environment, SB9 and 10 will be very destructive.
Thank you, Lynetta. I have one question I want to address because it is a very specific one. And since I mentioned the high fire zones, there's someone in the Q&A that's talking about that people are saying that these bills exclude areas in the high fire zone. There is that rhetoric. It is absolutely incorrect. And the reason for that is and this is a very deceptive actually language in the bills, because it starts out saying referred to, except for areas in the very high fire district, zone rather. And then that exception has an exception, except if the community has adopted fire mitigation standards in their building standards. Well, basically that means, as Dan Carrick mentioned, that's just in every building code. We have to have homes that will be fire resistant materials. You can't put on shake roofs anymore if you're going to build a new home. But that doesn't mean homes don't burn in a fire. And that doesn't mean or solve the issue of how do you get everybody out if you densify to the point where people can't move, they're stuck on the road trying to get out of the fire zone, but there's no room because there's too many people on that road and it's clogged and they die in their cars. So that's the issue that we're talking about here. And believe me, I've looked at it. It is not an exception. It's an exception that it fits everybody in. So it's deceptive. And so that's something I wanted to share with people. Did you want to say something, Sharon?
I was just gonna offer this, and then I think we should probably close because we've been going for 2 hours, and I'm really grateful that we still have 650 people that are this keenly interested that they're staying with us. I've seen this come up in the chat window a lot too. People are asking about YIMBY. They're running into them in their communities. They're being shouted down by them at hearings. So we'll give you a little backstory on that. YIMBY is what's called grass tops. The people on this call today are grassroots, right? These are just volunteers, neighbors, people that are not getting paid to do this, that just really want to protect our communities and really try to find good solutions to our housing problems. YIMBY is what's called grass tops, meaning they're well paid. They are funded to the tune of about $3 million, and their biggest donors are Yelp, Stripe, Twitter, Facebook. And so, why would tech companies really want to hire activists to push these bills? Think about it. You need a lot of housing for your workers. That's really expensive. It turns out it's a lot cheaper to pay some activists to go convince the legislature to do it for you, a lot cheaper, right? So that is where they're coming from. So when you're up against YIMBYs, know a couple of things. One is they shout down housing justice activists. They have a little white privilege problem. They've been known to shout down communities of color that are saying, hey, where's a little housing justice here? They've been known to do that. And who are they paid by? Tech companies. And whose position are they advocating? That of developers and investors. So it's the best marketing you've ever heard, kind of like the high fire protection that you were just talking about, Beatrice. The brochure looks nice, but the reality is something quite different, right? So the brochure here is, yes, in my backyard, what great, except that they don't have backyards and they're paid for by tech companies. So just know that that's who you're dealing with. And don't be afraid to call them out accordingly. Does that make sense?
Yes. So, and people are asking, does it make sense to repeat your opposition if you've already launched it? Yes. They need to know that this is something you are not going to let go. This is so important to you that you have to underscore it. And that's why I mentioned it's not just people in your area with the same district representative. You need to contact everybody you know in the state of California to have them do the same with their representatives. So the goal is there cannot be 41 people to vote for this, for each of these bills, because that means they pass. And that means that the governor, who's been very inclined to vote into these bills, very well may sign them, and then they become law. And that's where we're strapped. And there's very little alternatives at that point. And so again, I would not hope on some legal type action that would prevent it, because the legislature will have this situation where they'll say, well, we're very concerned about the lack of affordable housing in California. Yes, but they won't address the fact that this does not solve the problem. But because there's such a broad power they have to enact legislation without a constitutional amendment, courts will indulge them in this regard. So when they enact these kinds of laws, so it's up to you. Yes, oppose and oppose often. That's the rule of the game. So does anybody want to say anything else before we close with these wonderful people and let them go run to their district offices come Monday morning? Yes.
We can do this. We can do this.
Yes,
We can do
yes.
this.
We can do this. And just remember, we just started. I mean, it just was in my heart to say, people need to know that we cannot let them find out for the first time when the bulldozer is next door. So that's what this has been about. But that only happened 3 weeks ago. We put it together. We got It Takes a Village. And we just got people who are like-minded groups that say people deserve to know what's happening, and we have to tell them now before it's too late. So that's what this has been about, folks. We don't have any interests, and I'm speaking for everybody here, other than seeing that your needs are met and that your interests are addressed by the California State Legislature, because as elected officials, we have done our best. But unfortunately, our efforts have been unavailing. So now it's up to you. We are passing you the baton.